you for tuning in this morning. I'd like to just share a little bit about how this workshop came about. In the early part of 2020, I got together as a regional resource minister for ABCOFLASH, and we conducted a survey. And in the survey, we asked a few questions of some of the things that were needed for the local churches. And out of that survey, several of the pastors requested assistance with financial planning. And so through that, we contacted Ms. Floyd, and she agreed to host several workshops. So this is 1 out of 5 workshops, and we'll be doing 1 workshop per month. So just a little bit about Mrs. Floyd. She is the CEO and consultant for Simple Delta nonprofit. And throughout her career as an executive director of a small nonprofit, Lydia attempted to help those seeking to start nonprofits or churches and small agencies who needed assistance. So with that, I'm not going to give the full introduction, but what I would like to do real fast, and I believe this will help Mrs. Floyd when she prepares to do her presentation. For those of you that are online, if you could just share just a little bit about why you're tuning in this morning, and then we'll have a better understanding of how to kind of hone in on the information she's going to disseminate. So let's start with Dr. Abraham. David.
Well, I gotta go first, man. No, I was playing. I'm Dr. Parker. I am actually a church planter in Bakersfield, California. Bakersfield is it's not a huge city, but it's not rural. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. So definitely, as you're doing your presentation, keep us really, really poor folks with little to no resources in mind. How on earth do you start something from nothing? So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Someone else.
I'm Tom Vaughn. I'm from Obi-Wan Church in San Diego. I'm the church moderator and the senior elder.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thomas.
Good morning. Maria O'Kelly Green from Macedonia Baptist Church in Los Angeles, and I'm chair of our church's trustee board.
Wonderful. On the trustee board. Very good.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jerry Lee, and I'm from Chinese Zion Baptist Church. I'm part of one of the members of the board of directors at our church.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
I am Mike Woodcock. I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church of North Hollywood, Lydia's church, and I'm here because I know how much she has helped our church for many years now, but to get our finances in order and everything, and I'm looking forward to this. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael.
We're going to ask a poll question, and people will be able to answer these questions in the chat. So if you're not comfortable speaking right now, that's fine.
Awesome.
We will ask that as we go along. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Augie Bao. I'm with the MMBB Retirement Plan. I always love listening to anything related to church finances, and I'm also available. I know in the course of discussion, there might be a question related to MMBB. So I wanted to be available in case any pastors or leaders were interested in MMBB retirement.
Thank you.
My name is William Epps. I pastor the Second Baptist Church of Los Angeles. And like Augie Bao, I'm part of MMBB. I've been serving on their board of managers for 20 years. And I just wanted to see if there was something that this is presenting that could benefit MMBB, or if MMBB could benefit some of what you're doing.
Okay, so I think Mrs. Floyd kind of have a feel of where to go from here. So we're going to turn the workshop over to Mrs. Lydia Floyd.
Well, I'm very excited to be here, everyone. My name is Lydia Floyd. I am a wife of a musician who plays at our church, and I have 2 adult children, one a pastor himself, a youth pastor, and one a preschool teacher. I am the CEO, as Pastor Talib mentioned, of Simple Data Nonprofit Consulting, which is the nonprofit, the second ministry that I started, but the first one is I am the CEO of Hands for Hope LA, which is a free after-school program located at First Baptist Church in North Hollywood. And these are things that I've been doing for many years. The nonprofit that I run at the after-school program is 22 years old. And so I've learned a lot about running a nonprofit in those years. And then this Simple Data Nonprofit Consulting, I started a few years back because during my tenure as a nonprofit leader, I was approached many times and asked, can you help me start a nonprofit? Can you help me figure out how to do this? So I decided to retire and start a consulting company. Well, the nonprofit that I founded, now the people that we put in place there have left. So I've gone back to that, as well as continuing with this consulting effort that I'm doing. And I, during this pandemic, went on to get my master's in organizational leadership. And prior to that, I have a bachelor's in accounting. So I think that's my specialty, kind of my niche is to help with accounting, but I do other projects, and the projects that Pastor Talib mentioned are board development, which, for churches, it's not necessarily called a board, or it may be called a trustee board, it may be called something else, but it really is your leadership team. So we're going to have a little conversation about that, but it's more developed in the board development training, which will happen next month. And then we also do succession planning, because once you have that leadership team, they may not always be there. So you would need to think about who might be a good candidate to replace different people that are in leadership. So that is the 3rd workshop. The 4th workshop is called, I believe it's the event planning workshop. And, nonprofits raise a lot of funds from fundraising events. And I think churches maybe miss an opportunity to do that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and talk about the best way to do it, and perhaps some sources of income with events like auctions and things like that you can do at events. So that's an event planning workshop. And then the last one is called nonprofit management, because it's kind of an overview of all of it. So it'll be kind of a final fine tuning of what we've talked about in some of the sessions, and a little bit more about running a nonprofit. So the churches are 501c3s. They have the same classification as nonprofits. So we want to be able to see the difference between the churches and the nonprofits, and how nonprofits have certain requirements and tax requirements, not taxes, but returns that they have to file. Churches are supposed to be filing them too. I think the government is not as strict with churches as they are with nonprofits, but there is an exercise that you can do, which is to fill out your 990 form. That's what they want you to fill out. When you're a new, like Dr. Abraham spoke about, new nonprofits, they are, I think, being a little bit stricter and asking that you be a 501c3 and fill out these documents. But the bulk of the churches don't do the 990s. There's a little reaction tab on the bottom of your screen where you can raise your hand. If you do 990 forms, if you do, can you click that button and raise your hand? I just want to see if any of you fill out the 990 forms for your church, or are aware if your church is filling out a 990 form. So no one is. So that's interesting, isn't it? That 501c3s are required to do returns, but churches don't seem to be, and it doesn't seem to matter. But if you are asked to do it, correct? So new churches.
No. I was trying to speak. No, actually, it's in the filing paperwork that you file. We've been 501c3 since 2013. So unless something has changed, It's in the paperwork that churches, specifically churches and churches only, are not required to do that form. So
Okay.
that's by law. That's in the law.
Okay, well then that's good to know because churches should, but it's interesting when you look at those, take a look at a 990 form because it is, you should still be doing the same type of classification within your bookkeeping and looking at your organization as a nonprofit in the same manner. So that's something we could get into deeper personally with your agencies if you'd like, but there is, Shirley just sent me my notes. Thank you, Shirley.
I was told it's a good idea to use it as an internal audit instrument, to do an internal audit. That's what
Exactly what I mean. Exactly what I mean. Taking a look at it in terms of what it does for you and what you're able to see. Okay, so you can go to the next slide. This is a question that Pastor Talib mentioned somewhat, just to see what type of role you play in your church. And some of you have answered this already. So we don't have a poll. We're not going to go to the poll. I think I have a sense of who we have on the line. And you can go back one screen, Shirley, just for a second. The people that we are working with are the leadership team. And in your church, you may be the pastor, you may be a deacon, you may be a member of a committee or the trustee board. You may just be a church member that's involved or looking to get involved. You're a leader of a nonprofit, or you may just be interested, as Augie and I believe it was Pastor Epps mentioned. But if you're interested in the finances, understanding what financial obligations the church has, what financial responsibilities you have as a leader, to oversee what the bookkeeper is doing, to understand what the requirements are, and to make sure that they're getting done in the proper manner. So that's why I needed to know who is on the line, who is on the call, and gear what I'm saying towards you. You may be at the ranks of years of doing this and understand completely all the things that I'm saying, or you may be new to this and really need to understand the basics. So I apologize to those of you who are have done this for a while, and this is maybe a repetitious for you, but I do need to break it down a little bit for those that are just starting. Okay, so you can go to the next one, Shirley, and that speaks about the toolbox that we just talked about, the toolbox contents, the difference in the different workshops that are coming in the future. So this, I've already spoken about that. So we're going to go on to today's topic for God's finances. I wanted to speak about the fact that, has anyone familiar with Crown? You know what Crown is? Crown. We've had Crown people come to our church and speak to our members about their finances, about their personal finances and how they can improve them. And this is very good to do it with a Christian perspective. And that's what Crown does. But they had some great language in their documentation. So I brought that language to my notes where I talked about the Crown language that I borrowed, just for those of you that are not familiar with Crown, is that, we should teach God's stewardship principles and help those in our congregation who are living paycheck to paycheck, who don't know how they'll pay bills, feed their children, or retire. Because we know that it is not our money, it is His money. And we set an example in how we manage His money that comes into the church. Through money management and tithing, people come face to face with God, His timeless principles, and not only experience relief from their financial pain, but more importantly, their lives are changed forever. So I found that very meaningful that, we want to help people understand how to manage God's money, God's finances, and to see that we are managing it appropriately. So today we're going to examine the optimal church finance goals and record keeping. We're going to discuss the correlation between proper financial management and the congregation's willingness to tithe. Because what they see from what we're talking about today, if that's in place, then that makes people, especially people who are familiar with it and understand what you're supposed to be doing, then you want to make sure that that's being done. And then we're going to look at some sample reports, and we're going to review the need for a qualified bookkeeper and a finance committee perhaps to oversee. If you can raise your hand, if you have a finance committee at your church. Great, great. Okay, so some of you do, some of you don't, but it's a team of people who are looking at what your bookkeeper does, not just the board or the trustees. It's a specific group that is looking at that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. And you're going to be able to review and compare how your church handles its overall financial management operations. We're going to have a discussion about who handles the financial management internally, who handles it externally, who reviews it. We're going to talk about if they need further training. There's all types of training that they could get that would help them and help you. This is an introductory training, but you can do further training. You can have someone from our team come out to your organization and go over it with you. We've done that with a few different churches. So we can do that for you. You can, what internal controls do you have in place? Do you have internal controls? And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. Accountants understand it, and perhaps some of you do, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to have question and answer and see if there's anything else that I can cover for you. And how this all impacts your operations, your financing at your church, your financial management at your church. And for some people, finances is tenuous. It's they say it's like deer in a headlight, where you're not really able to understand what it is that's. It's like taking math at school. Some people have challenges with math and looking at these types of documents, and we understand that, but we need to have the correct people in place working on it so that they're able to understand what's going on for you and that you're in compliance. We really can't ignore, when we're speaking about finances, how the environment is impacting your financial state. So there's so much that's been happening lately. Everyone's been experiencing the pandemic and the things that have been going on. We have to address those things and take them into consideration when we're looking at the finances. You have to consider possible alternate methods of funding. Some of you have had to do that. You've had loss of contributions and tithes. You've had virtual events in place of regular events or no events at all. And this all brings you to loss of funding. So, just taking those things into consideration as you manage your finances, that those are things where you have to pivot and address things differently. If you've lost funding, maybe you've done some grant applications. Maybe you've done some applications for COVID funding. If you haven't, those are things that you could have done that has helped many churches. Raise your hand if you got COVID funding from anyone or anywhere. Okay, COVID loans, COVID funding, sometimes that was available. And some of you didn't pursue it and could have, and maybe needed some help to do that. So having the proper people in place who can help you with that is part of what we're hoping you will come away from this workshop with, that's the need to have people who can assist you to go after the type of funding that's available to churches. There are grants available to faith-based organizations. Are you aware of that? So we're not quite ready for that one yet. Surely we want to go back to the current climate. Yes, thank you. So have your operations remained the same? Have you had less activity? Do you have the same level of care for your finances? So is your person that manages your finances not well? Do they have COVID? Is there in their family? Are they not able to do the work the way that you've had it done? Did you have a counting committee? We have a counting committee at our church, but everyone has not been there through the pandemic. And so we've had to juggle and pivot and, different people count this time and teach different people how to count and whatever we need to do to manage our finances in the same manner, right? And I apologize to those of you who don't have your screen where you can raise your hand. There's a button that says reactions where you can raise your hand. And if you have access to that, you can do that, or you can come on screen and raise your hand. But I just was curious. I'm asking different questions throughout the workshop just to cause you to think about what your organization has. So, it's a good time right now during the pandemic to fine tune your operations. Maybe some of you are more available and working remotely and have a little bit of time where you can take a look at how you're doing things and fine tune things. And, there may be some blessings to count and some things to be grateful for. Maybe you didn't have to pay certain bills, or there's different things that you didn't have to do. So, taking a look at, whether or not people are working remotely, if you have paid staff, how are they working remotely? What is available to them? Is your HR in place if you have payroll? Are you in compliance about what they're supposed to have as when they have COVID and things like that? There's all of these things to take into consideration if you're managing a church or managing finances for a church. And, they have to get a certain amount of sick time. You've reduced your operations, you're recovering now and reopening, but there's also, other things happening now in the climate. So taking into consideration what is going on externally and the environment is necessary. So on the leadership front, who is responsible for finances? Is it the moderator, the pastor, the deacons, the administrative assistant, the ministry leaders? You all have different roles and different people there. So who do you have being responsible for the finances, the actual doing of it and the oversight of the finances? If you did accounts payable or you made deposits somewhere, that doesn't mean that you understand bookkeeping or accounting to the degree that you need to. So who is doing it? Think about that question. Who in your organization is doing it? Sometimes churches have volunteers in this position. Do they have the ability to understand finances? Are they reliable? Do they do it regularly? Are they discreet and, understand that it's not public information sometimes? Do they monitor the security of it? Do they understand the keeping it safe and keeping the documents in a safe environment in a filing system? Is that all done in the manner that it should be done? Do you have internal controls in place? And I want to go into a little bit of detail about internal controls. Internal controls means that you don't want to have the same person taking care of your signing your checks that's writing your checks. Does everybody understand that? Is there anyone that's right now has the same person that does everything? And if you do, you can raise your hand, you can let me know. But if you have the same person writing your checks that's signing your checks, then that's not proper internal controls. Those of us that are accountants who have taken accounting background, they teach that in school, that you have to take precautions to avoid the risk. And we trust everyone in our church. We feel that they are, they have good hearts, but sometimes there's temptations. So we want to remove temptation by putting internal controls in place. You want to put these internal controls in place. You want to, sometimes there's so few people that you're forced to have the same people filling multiple roles. But you must make an effort to separate those that review the finances from those that manage the finances so that there's oversight. So you want to be thinking about that and making sure that the person that does one thing is not the person that does everything. So that I just want to really state that for the record and just give you an example of a church where they had a father and son working on their finances. So the son was the moderator and the father was the head of finance. And the father took money from the bank account and the son covered for him. Okay, so this happens. It's not something that I'm making up. So as church leaders, you have to just take that into consideration and avoid that by never having two people be in control that are from the same family or that are both connected, a husband and wife in that manner. Okay, so that's what's internal controls. And there's a lot of different other internal controls you can put in place that would help you to be certain that these types of things don't happen. If the bookkeeper is doing reports for you, that bookkeeper would need to give reports to someone every month, and that person is reviewing it. So the bookkeeper is never in a position to do anything that would cause the church to lose money. Okay, so internal controls is something that needs to happen. On the screen, you see the descriptions that I have here of what may be happening at your church. Your moderator may be the person that signs checks and have access to all the software and reviews your monthly reports and meets with the finance committee and the diaconate board and the congregation. If that's not in place, that may be something you want to put in place. And then a bookkeeper, this is the person that keeps track of your day-to-day financial transactions, purchases, sales, donations, receipts, payments, things that, keeping track of if you have assets, expenses, income. That's their job. I have a bookkeeper job description that I present when I do a project with your organization that would help you to see what they're supposed to be doing. But right now, I don't know what you have them doing, but these are things that are part of their responsibilities. Doing bank reconciliations every month, that's part of their responsibilities. And if you're doing dual entry bookkeeping, which means you're doing accrual bookkeeping, and those are terms that we're going to talk about a little bit more, but there's cash and accrual. And accrual means that you're recording things that happen. Like, for example, if you have a bill, the minute you get the bill, you record that in your bookkeeping, even if it's not due yet. So you don't wait until you pay it to record it. That's called dual entry bookkeeping, and that's what's called accrual bookkeeping. So you have to decide whether you're on a cash basis or an accrual basis. And if you're on an accrual basis, you're doing dual entry bookkeeping. A lot of people don't do that because it's a lot of extra work for the bookkeeper. And your bookkeeper may only be doing a few hours a week or something like that. So you don't want to necessarily have them do that, but you might need to do it. If you want to have your books be really accurate, then you really want to be on an accrual basis, because if you have a bill that comes in for $10,000, but you don't record it because you haven't paid it yet, then your bookkeeping is not really showing you the current state of your bookkeeping, right? Your reports are not showing you the current state, okay? So those are the things that the bookkeeper does. And then you may want to have someone who's an accountant or a CPA. If you are required to do 990s, like Dr. Abraham said, you're not required, but if you were required to, then you might have a person who does those for you, right? But periodically, even if you don't, you want to have a CPA come in and do an audit for you. If you have loans and investments and things like that, then you need to have a CPA who's reviewing things, possibly doing what's called an audit for you. So you want to have a person who may review your reports at the end of the year to confirm the bookkeeper's work. And if you're for 501c3, you're not required, even though that says that here, and you definitely don't have to pay taxes, but you still want to have this type of oversight. Okay. Can you go to the next screen? Great, thank you. There are different things that you can use to keep track of your bookkeeping. And some of you have different things like this in place. We have a poll where we're going to ask these questions, but you may have QuickBooks for your accounting. There's QuickBooks Desktop, there's QuickBooks Online, right? The desktop is kind of people are coming away from it now. People are using more the web version, much more now than they used to be. And there was a lot of different desktop software that people were using, that the online versions are more popular now. My company helps people that use QuickBooks Online. So I convert to online for those that are not using the online version, because the other versions just don't do all of the things that the online does. So the online enables you to integrate with your banking. And at the bottom, it says connect to QuickBooks. Your banking can be connected, your direct deposit. You can have banking, your payroll company connect with your bookkeeping, your QuickBooks. You can have your credit card processing connect with your bookkeeping. And those things will enable you to have your bookkeeper have less work to do. They don't have to enter those things because they're integrated and they automatically go into your QuickBooks, into your accounting, into your bookkeeping. And you pay less to the bookkeeper to do it. So those are things to consider. There's other things, other software available. And we were going to have a poll. Go ahead to the next screen, Shirley, that asks what type of accounting systems you use. Do you use QuickBooks Online? Do you use desktop? If you feel like it, you can put it in the chat, say which one you use, which will tell us a little bit more about what software. If you have other software that you don't use, or if you don't know, don't worry about it. You can put IDK or something like that. But is it integrated with your bank? If you do have QuickBooks Online or any other one that I don't know, there may be others that do it. Is it integrated with your bank? Is it integrated with your payroll service? Is it integrated with your credit card processing? Do you take credit cards? It took a long time for our church to switch over to taking credit cards, but it's made a huge difference for our organization, where we're able to take credit cards every Sunday from people. And there's fees that they charge. And PayPal charges a lesser fee. Did you know that? Do you use PayPal? Do you use Square? Which one, you can compare fees. So QuickBooks Online, and if it's integrated, that's great. What payroll service do you use? Do you use ADP? Do you use QuickBooks itself has a quick pay program? Do you use Paychecks? Or maybe you don't know which one you use. You want to find these things out so you get a sense of what your organization is doing if you don't know this already. And then, do you use PayPal? Do you use Square? Do you use something else that's even cheaper? I found a church that had a very low rate, and I couldn't remember what program they used. But there's other things out there. There's tons of software out there that you can use. These are the more popular, the more common, but there's others. So you're just investigating which is best for your organization, and then you're making sure that they don't change the fees on you midway. They were charging 2%, but now they charge 4%, and you didn't even realize it. So now you're paying more. So you're looking into those things. That's part of the responsibility of the bookkeeper and the staff that works with you. Okay, next screen, Shirley. So, we talked about accrual. Everybody understands what accrual is now versus cash basis. So if your organization is on a cash basis or an accrual basis, how are they recording your accounting, right? I'm not going to go into all of these, but there's many accounting terms that you could be familiar with. We talked about the full audit and the CPA possibly coming in and auditing your books. If you have over a certain amount of income or a certain amount of in your budget, then that's required to have an audit. If you're getting loans and things like that, it's required to have an audit. So it's not a bad idea to do that every once in a while anyway, and have audited financial statements that you can present if you need to present them to someone. Okay, the 990 form we talked about, again, not required for your organization. And these slides I've set up for nonprofit or churches. So sometimes you'll see things that are only related to nonprofits, but it's always good for churches to be aware of it, because some churches have nonprofits within their structure. They have a separate nonprofit that they work with. So you want to know that they are able to be doing the same types of things that I'm recommending here for churches. Okay. A trial balance is something that I just want you don't need to understand what the report is necessarily. You may never see it, but the truth of accounting is that there's debits and credits, and they have to line up and balance. So everything has to balance. And we're going to talk about that again in a minute. We talked about dual entry or double entry bookkeeping. The general ledger is something I recommend that you look at every now and then. The general ledger shows every account, and it shows everything that was put in, every transaction. So if you looked at it monthly, you'd see every transaction that went into whatever account monthly. And we're going to talk about the chart of accounts next. So you'll see what accounts I'm talking about. So, your, excuse me 1 second. I'm a big fan of this topic, so I sometimes digress, but there should be monthly reports generated after the bank accounts are reconciled. Every month, your bank account should be reconciled. And if that's not being done by your bookkeeper or someone, then you need to do that, because you cannot trust that the bank is doing things accurately unless you reconcile periodically. And that's part of the bookkeeper's responsibilities. So you want to be wary of a bookkeeper's behind. I have a client who told me that their bookkeeper hadn't reconciled in like 6 months. And I'm a little concerned about that, because now, how do we know for sure that everything that's supposed to be in there is in there? Now, if you're integrating from QuickBooks into QuickBooks from your bank, then you know that it's all coming into this holding place, but then it has to go from there into your bookkeeping. So you want to make sure that that's happening regularly and that you're up to date with it, and the person who's doing your bookkeeping is up to date with it. And if you're getting monthly reports, then you can ask, has this been reconciled? Was the bank reconciled before I received this report? I don't want a report where the bank isn't reconciled, because it may not be accurate. Okay, so let's see. So the source documents, we talked about what those may be, a bill or deposits or invoices. Those are things that the bookkeeper can use to enter into the bookkeeping. And then, when they're paid, you can enter bills when they arrive if you're on an accrual basis, right? So those are source documents that they would use to put things into the bank. So are those coming in? Who opens the mail? Who gets the mail and gives it to the bookkeeper? Do they see it when they're supposed to see it in a timely manner? You know, are the source documents available to them? They can't do their work unless they get that. So what is your system? What is your process for getting the bookkeeper the information that they need in order to do the bookkeeping the way it needs to be done, right? And again, we're mentioning here double entry bookkeeping. Are they to enter every bill as it comes in so you know what bills there are, right? So that when you get a report, you can see on an accrual basis, you can see how much you owe and how much you're expecting if you have receivables, right? Most churches don't necessarily have receivables. Receivables would be somebody that pledges to give you X dollars every month, or, you know, income that you have from some type of business. Then you might have receivables coming in. And you really want to be dual entry at that point so that you can see what monies are coming into you. Okay. And the output would then be your reports that you would see, your financial statements. And we're going to go into those. Next screen, Shirley. So we talked about the accounts, categorizing what things, the source documents, and knowing where to put it is what the bookkeeper is doing for you as well. So if something comes in to your checking account and you need to know what it was for, it was office supplies, it was a Staples bill, and they're recording that it was paid out of the checking account, and that in the other side of that entry, because remember everything balances, is office supplies. So they're putting it in one place and another. There's always going to be two entries for bookkeeping. Everything has to balance. Okay, so this chart of accounts kind of shows you, and we can arrange to have these screen slides sent to you after this if you'd like to have this for your records. Anything that we're showing here, you can have an access to. Those of you that have attended the workshop, I would like you to have it. Those that didn't, I really would prefer that they get it when they see the workshop, because otherwise they don't really understand it. Okay, so these are some sample accounts that you might have, but your bookkeeping may have others. But part of my job that I've done with my clients in nonprofits and churches is looking at their chart of accounts to see if it's right. And I tell you 9 times out of 10, it's not right. There's things missing. There's things set up as an expense when it's not really, as an asset when it's supposed to be an expense, or as income when it's supposed to be a liability. So if you got a PPP loan, for example, that's a loan. It's not income until it's forgiven. So that it needs to be recorded accurately. It needs to be recorded as a liability until such time as they say you don't have to pay this back. Then you change it and make an entry, what's called a journal entry, to remove it and put it where it goes. Okay, so the next screen, Shirley. So there's financial reports, and they have a couple of different names, but they're all the same. A balance sheet, which shows your assets minus your liabilities, equals your net assets. So there's 3 different things there: your assets, your liabilities, your net assets. The difference between the two. And I'm gonna show you that again so you'll see more of that. But they call that a balance sheet, because remember we said balance. So the new term for it in the nonprofit community is the statement of financial position. So when you get financial statements from your CPA, from whomever, you may see it with that title on the top of it. Okay, but it is still a balance sheet, and it is still your assets and your liabilities. And the difference between the two is called net assets in the nonprofit realm. Now, in a regular business, it might be called owner's equity or shareholder's equity or something like that. But in nonprofits, it's called net assets. Okay, and you want to see a report that's compared to the prior year. Whenever you get that report, it's a great idea to see it compared to the prior year, because then you're able to see the change and see if it's being recorded accurately both years. So that's the statement of financial position. The next one is called statement of activities. That's your income statement or profit and loss. Okay, your revenue minus your expenses equals your net assets. So that's going to come up with your net assets for the year. Now, net assets is a cumulative account. So each year it's being added to, but your net assets for the year you're seeing is the difference between your revenue and your expenses each year. And you also want to look at that in comparison to 1 year to the next, whenever you're getting that report. Okay. Budget versus actuals is your comparison of what you think is going to happen. And we're going to talk about budget in a minute. What you think is going to happen versus what really happened. Actuals. Okay. This is the same thing as an income statement. It's going to have the same information on it. Same thing as an income statement or profit and loss. But next to, in the next column, instead of comparing it to the prior year, you're comparing it to what you thought was going to happen, your budget. And you need to see this report every month as well. Okay. Because if you let a few months go by, then you're really not sure if you're meeting what your goals were. So you're looking at that periodically in order to be able to see that what we thought was going to happen is happening. Or maybe we need to do a budget adjustment and change. And a pandemic has caused many to do budget adjustments. We turned off, all of our bills, all of our alarm system. We turned off all kinds of things. So the budget just went out the window and we had to really adjust it. Okay. And then the last document that I recommend and that I show my clients how to do is a cash flow projection, because looking at it, the budget month to month helps you, but you really need to know month to month what your cash is going to look like. Am I going to have enough to pay these bills each month? And those of you that are close to the wire, and we've all been there, I don't know, I think that a lot of us have been, you want to make sure that you're looking at your cash to know that you're going to have enough in the coming months. And if not, to make adjustments to make that happen. Well, we're going to have an event in April, but we need money in February. Maybe we should move the date of the event to February so that will bring us in enough income to pay the expenses we have through February. So just a cash flow gives you a different way of looking at those numbers from the other reports. Okay, so these are the ones that I recommend. There's others out there. Some of you have others that you use, but I think when you have these, it will give you what you need. Next slide, Shirley. So, when you're looking at your financials, you're looking at assets and liabilities. And we have $40,000 here in assets and $28,000 in liabilities. So what should the net assets be? Put it in the chat, anybody that would like to. Because remember, we said everything needs to balance. So if your assets are $40,000 and your liabilities are $28,000, and I apologize, I don't see if anybody answered, but I'm going to tell you the answer. It's $12,000. And the difference between your income expenses is also $12,000. Does everybody see that? So your net assets for the year is $12,000. So the assets and liabilities is your balance sheet. And when you put the 12,000 with the assets, it balances 40,000 on one side, 28 and 12 on the other side, 40. Then your income and expense also balances. Your income is 50, and the difference between your 38,000, your expenses is 38,000, 12,000, and the net assets is your net income at the bottom. Okay. I'm simplifying what could be complex for people. I apologize, but this is kind of what it gives you, a simplified way of looking at it. And when you look at the reports should be doing the same things. We're going to have some samples so you can see that. Okay. So this is a sample statement of financial position. Shirley, if you're able to make it a little bigger, that would be great. Or if each of you can make it bigger on your screen so that you can see it. Let's go back one. Yeah. So we can see that the assets, they don't have them separated here. Let's see, land, buildings. Yeah, the assets are $19,000, 19 million. And then the liabilities are 290,000. And the net assets is 18,000. And those liabilities and those assets add up together to the same amount as your assets. So think of that 19 million as the 40,000. think of the liabilities as the 28,000, and the difference is the 12,000. That's the net assets. I hope, raise your hand if this is confusing, because then I'll spend more time with it. If everybody understands this, those of you that are 9s have already seen this, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you that are 2s, if you need more clarification, let me know. Okay, so go to the next screen, Shirley. This is a sample of the statement of activity. The one we talked about, that was the income statement, or the same as the profit and loss. So we're looking at the revenues that are coming in, and you may not have government contracts, or you may not have gain and loss and whatever they have listed here, but you do have income, you do have revenue, you do have money coming in, contributions, donations, things like that. And those add up to, on this screen, 7,126,000. And then you see the expenses below that, 6,937,000. And the difference is the change in the net assets that year. Okay, so the more you look at this, the more familiar you will be. But reading financial statements is the responsibility of a leader. They cannot leave that to someone else. And so being able to understand what it is that's being presented and done by the people that are tracking your finances for you. Okay, and you may be getting it looking slightly different, but it's pretty much the same document. If they give you a profit and loss, that's the same as a statement of activity. If they give you a balance sheet, that's the same as a statement of financial position. Okay, these are just terms that nonprofits use nowadays. The statement of financial position is the equivalent for a for-profits company balance sheet. It provides a snapshot of your organization's finances, listing assets in order of liquidity, the speed at which they can be converted to cash. And we're going to go to the budget in a minute, but liabilities in order of length of obligation. So how much, you'll see long-term liabilities, and then you'll see short-term liabilities, or vice versa. But the length of obligation is how they record liabilities. Your assets includes cash and cash equivalents, investments, grants receivable, depreciable furnishings or equipment. One more back, Shirley. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. One more back. Good. Yeah, these are ones I'm just going over the statement of financial positions in more detail for you. Okay. So your liabilities includes accounts payable, grants due to other organizations, designated funds or debts. Your net assets are those remaining after the liabilities have been subtracted from the assets. So that's the accounting equation, the balance. Assets equals liabilities plus net assets. And that demonstrates that your nonprofit has enough cash or cash equivalents on hand to equal your outstanding debts. And your balance sheet provides a business snapshot of what your company owns and owes through the date listed, right? Usually at the end of a financial year. What is it that you owe? And you want to compare to the previous year. Remember, we talked about comparing, so you can see if that's improved or it's gotten worse, where you owe more money to people. If your liabilities are heavy, then funders are looking at that. Not necessarily funders for you, but banks might be looking at that. If you're going for a loan, they're looking at these documents. So you want to look at them first. You want to make sure that they're the way they need to be. You have to be informed so you can help make sure that your financial management is in good hands. Okay. Your statement of activity shows how your net assets, go to the next one, Shirley, how your net assets change over time. So they increase as revenue comes in, and they decrease as expenses are paid. So it's the nonprofit equivalent of a for-profit income statement. Make sense, everyone? Okay, so let's go to the budget one. So, on your budget, you want to identify the amount of money you have coming in income, what you think might be coming in, as we mentioned, and you want to track expenses that you think will be going out. And you want to set goals for yourself. Okay, and look at what you can look at last year to determine your budget for the next year. That's a way to do it. You can go on, Shirley. What types of expenses you have? Your staff, your payroll, your pastor's salary. And MMBB really can register here that there's some financial things that need to be done when you have a pastor. Their payroll is not a normal payroll. They have household allowances and utility allowances and different things that should be given to your pastor. And if they've not been given or recorded, then that needs to happen. And there's the MMBB, I'm sure, can advise people on that type of thing. And at the end, if you have questions for them about that, we can ask. But there are different methods of managing how the pastor's salary is being recorded. And your bookkeeper, the average bookkeeper is not familiar with that for churches. If they've done bookkeeping for an organization or a business, they may not have no clue about what a church needs in terms of recording the pastor's salary allowances. Okay, so, what other expenses do you have? Do you have a music line item? Do you have musicians? Do you have sound? Do you have facility repair? Do you have repair and maintenance? Do you have administrative assistance, which would be payroll as well? Do you have office supplies? Do you have rent, property taxes, utilities, insurance? These are the type of expenditures that you need to budget for. What do you think it's going to cost you to have these expenses paid for? And then you need to raise that much in income. So basically, when you do a budget, you're looking at the expenses, not necessarily looking at the income as much. You can look at the income next, but you want to look at the expenses first so that you can see what type of expenses your budget you need, what type of funds you need to raise. So, put in the chat any other expenses you think you might have that we don't have here. Any things that I haven't taken into consideration. These are your standard basic ones for those charities, those nonprofit startup churches that Dr. Abraham talked about. What kinds of things should they initially be looking at as expenses? Down the road, you're going to have more, maybe different things, but initially you definitely have this. Most churches have these types of expenses, right? So let's just talk about the income for a second before we move on. I'm sorry, Dr. Parker, I said Dr. Abraham, but Dr. Parker. The income that you might have would be donations that you get from the congregation. I don't know if you separate on your accounting what's tithes versus what, how do you list? So past due startup costs would fall into the same categories as these. These are the categories. And the chart of accounts that we talked about earlier lists the type of expenses. There's not really a startup cost type expense category here. I mean, you could have one, but generally, what was the cost for? That's where you would put it. So, yeah, that's where you would list each item that you expect. So if you're coming up with a budget for what you need in the future year, an example might be, we expect to raise $10,000 from the congregation. And perhaps some of that is tithing. You don't know how much is tithing and how much is just from general donations. And then we expect to spend $8,000 on the pastor and $1,000 on a musician and another $1,000 on expenses, repair and maintenance. I'm really simplifying it, but that's what a budget might look like. And it should be on a much larger scale. And I don't have a sample budget for you, but it basically looks like an income and expense statement. And you can take last year's income and expense and make that your budget. You could do that. You say, we're going to do exactly what we did last year, right? Or you could use the same budget each year if you feel like things aren't changing for you. Your income may not be changing. So your donations, you have the same membership and it's not decreasing. You want to be aware if it's decreasing. If you're losing members, then your income is going to decrease from donations. What can you do? And we talk about this in the event planning. What can you do to prevent the income from going down from what you projected in your budget? So if you projected that your income was going to be $21,000 in July, was it $21,000 in July? If it wasn't, in August, we need to be doing something so that it's going to be to make up that difference, to fill the gap. Otherwise, our total is not going to be what we projected for the total budget for the year. And this is what I talked about in the cash flow document. So this is the cash flow that kind of shows the income and expenses for each month on a month-by-month basis. So if you're looking at it month by month, even though the total is what you said for the year, is it going to happen in a timely manner so that you have the cash you need in order to survive each month, right? So our opening balance that was in the bank when the year started in July or whatever was $261. And we had income of $21,000 from renters, from events, from donations, from an endowment dividend that we get, whatever we have as income came in at $21,000. And if it does, and we only spent $9,500, our balance at the end of the month was $12,000. But if that did not happen in that manner, then you need to make adjustments in the next month in order to figure out how to make that happen. Maybe a renter paid late, so it didn't come in July like you thought. But then did you have enough? If a renter's supposed to give you $15,000 and they didn't give it to you, now you're in the deficit at the end of the month. You don't have enough in the bank account to pay those $9,000 in expenses. So you want to be looking at it month to month so that you can see how your cash is going to flow. And there's different cash flow documents. QuickBooks spits out one that you could look at too. But this way, looking at it this way to me makes a little bit more sense so that you're able to see month to month how you're going to be able to survive. Okay. Next screen, Shirley. I think we're down to the end of what I plan to share with you, but I want to do a Q&A before I do this right here, just to see if there's any questions I can answer. So Shirley, I know you have a question screen. You can go to that one first, and then we'll go back to this one. So you can unmute anyone, and raise your hand and ask a question, or you can just, Hi, Walter.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm in my treatment right now, so if you see me in a mask, I don't know if you can see me at all, but it's good to be with you.
Well, we thank you for coming to be with us during your treatment. I know that might be challenging for you, but
Yes.
we do see some evidence of it there. Did you have a question for me?
No, I'm just I'm appreciative of the presentation, because I think more members, and I was looking to see if we had more members of Panorama online. I see Dr. Talib, but it's really important to take advantage of your expertise and the clarity in which you explain things, because it gets very confusing if you don't have this kind of background. So I'm just appreciative. I don't have a question. I mean, I just applaud what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. I really appreciate that. I have really have an affinity, I think, for simplifying it for everyone. And I think I've done that. Walter and I are on the ABCOFLASH board together, and I really make an attempt to simplify it for the board members. Jerry, thank you for being with us. I'm sorry you have to go, but I try to simplify it for the board members, because as board members, you're still legally liable and responsible. So you can't take a position that, I don't know how to do it. Lydia's doing it. She's the treasurer. As long as she's doing it, I don't have to pay attention. You do have to pay attention, and you do have to understand what you're looking at. And everyone that's in a position of leadership should understand what they're looking at. Right? So thank you, Walter, for mentioning that. Anyone else? We will send out slides to everyone. Shirley will make sure that we have the correct one and get that to Debbie, and then she will send that out to everyone. So give us a little bit of time to do that. But those of you that attended will definitely have the documentation. And then if you have any questions, I really want to just in a moment tell you a little bit more about what I do for your church if you need that. So I come in, I take a look at your chart of accounts. I do your bank reconciliations to bring them up to date so that I can see that there's no problem if they're not very far behind. And I work with your bookkeeper to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that the reports are there for them to print every month for you. My email is going to be on the last screen, so everyone will be able to see it. And then if you give Debbie your email address, she will send you the presentation. But I think that my project that I do with different churches, that I've done with different churches, has helped them to be more organized and have more efficient financial management procedures. So that's what I recommend. If your church needs something specific, I can do that for you. But this is a general overview of the topic for everyone to understand. So I'd really love to know if you can go back one screen, Shirley, and tell me again how financially literate you are, just to see if any of you, if this has improved your financial literacy. Just go into the chat and put the number of if you feel like you're a little bit more financially literate now that you've had this information. Oh, Dr. Parker went from a 2 to a 5. I love it. Oh, you're a 9, Mike. Great. Just with the information that we shared today, I hope that it was clear enough that you feel comfortable to be able to read your financial statements, to know what financial statements you should be getting. And I'd be curious to know from Augie if this is something that you feel would be helpful to the general pastors that you deal with and the population, the leadership population. So Augie, if you'd like to comment.
Sure. No, I really thank you for your leadership and excellent presentation. And certainly all churches could benefit from this type of information. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And take a moment to just tell us how MMBB works with churches on this type of thing or something with their financials and for the pastors.
We focus on a smaller realm in terms of the pastor's benefits and the pastor's salary and so on. And you're helpful in terms of looking at the wider picture. And our niche is retirement benefits for pastors. So if anybody has questions about it, please feel free to contact me separately. And our website has information about retirement benefits. And we have some general information about some of the church finance reporting, but your presentation covered a lot more of what churches need to do. So thanks again.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm sure you've encountered, pastors with housing allowances and things like that need to be recorded correctly in the bookkeeping. And I've encountered quite a few that have not done that the way that it needs to be done.
Yeah, so one quick aside, we still get some churches who, quote unquote, give the pastor cash from the love offering each week. And yeah, you're shaking your head, I shake my head. And I just say, if your church ever were audited by the IRS, you could be in serious trouble. You really need to account for the money, especially if you're giving people tax deductions. You can't just collect cash and hand out cash. But unfortunately, some churches still do something like that.
And we didn't go into it, but the finance committee is a group that should be monitoring that. How is the money coming in? How is the cash coming in? How is it recorded? We have a procedure where there has to be 2 people. Remember, we talked about internal controls. 2 people whenever there's cash present. So those 2 people one is verifying for the other. They go all the way to the bank with it and put it into the bank together. 2 people. So cash should never be handled directly, handed to a person. You always want to have documentation for everything that's being given out or coming in. If you want to use envelopes for money coming in, if they're giving you cash, put it in an envelope, label it from who it is. We do have loose cash. We call it loose cash periodically because some people just don't comply. But we ask that people use envelopes and that we're able to record that and then give them information at the end of the year about what they donated. They need that for their taxes. So this pastor who's getting cash is not able to put that on his returns, or if he does, they want to know where it came from. So we've kind of had some bad habits because we haven't been audited. Normal businesses get audited regularly, so they don't do things like that. They've learned the hard way. but we have to be better about it. We have to be better about all of it. That's why this presentation is necessary. That, you know, we're better about recording, we're better about having a finance committee so that they can do that. And it can be as simple as 2 or 3 people, but those people are setting up those policies and procedures, those internal controls, so that everyone understands how things need to be managed. And then you're reviewing it periodically, because you set it up and then people leave and things change. So you want to review it and make sure that your processes are in place. So did we get any other questions? For those of you that are interested in contacting me, my information is going to come up on the screen. I'd love to hear from you with anything that you'd like to ask about this presentation or about me coming to your church or anything like that. Please feel free to contact me. I would love to know if there's any questions. And if there's anything in it that, you know, was confusing to you and I can clarify that, please let me know. Pastor Talib, I think I ended a little early, but if there's any questions, I'm here to answer that for a little bit. And then if you have anything you want to say.
Sure. I'd just like to thank Mrs. Floyd for an incredible and very informative workshop. I can tell you while you were speaking, the bells were going off over here because about 25, 30 years ago, when I planted my first church, unlike Dr. Parker, I made every mistake that you mentioned. And so I can tell you personally how pertinent and relevant this information is that you're disseminating and how important it is. And it might seem for those who have somewhat of an understanding of the finances of the church, but there are those who really don't, and they need to hear this. And I think even some who have an understanding need to be reminded. So I thank you again for an incredible workshop and for the information that and for you caring about the church. This is how we can become stronger as a religious institution and as a church body. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Pastor Talib. And I know that Debbie recorded the introductory workshop, which everyone can access, which talks about what each is going to be covered in each 5 of the 5 workshops. And then for this workshop, it's also recorded. So you can contact her, or that may be sent to you with the presentation so that you can show it to some of your members if you like, or I can come and do a presentation for your churches. We can talk about that. Just contact me. So my information is on the screen now. And I want to thank Shirley, my assistant, who's been here to help. And I apologize for the technical difficulties when we got started, but we're working on that. Hopefully for the next workshop, we'll have all of those kinks worked out. This is our first one with you.